A man in a trench coat in the dark. A woman's lost a kid sleeping in the park. Rag suits, daggers, Park Avenue. Everybody wants to talk to you about just some BS of there. Just some BS. Just some BS of yours. Just some BS. Just some BS, yeah. Just some BS, yeah. Just some BS of ours.
I don't think it works that way.
Sober. Sobriety is 90% mental.
And what? 10%
sober. I can will myself.
You can will yourself to sobriety.
Mm.
Well, I think you can will yourself to not drink, but I don't know if you can will yourself to being sober.
This is the biggest ethical crime governments globally commit. Yes, human rights abuses, bad. I agree, bad. War, awful, just awful, terrible.
Starvation.
Yeah, really, really irritating, and looks bad on us as humanity that we allow it to happen. And all that.
But medical, all that stuff.
Yeah. But the biggest one, is the global government's persistent refusal to fund hangover research. This is what frustrated me all through life, that you just can't get funding for hangover research. And it's not I'm not crazy. Well, yeah, I am crazy, but I'm not crazy because of this, if you know what I mean. Because it's not a conspiracy theory. Governments do genuinely refuse to fund hangover research because it's considered unethical. Because they fear that if you cure hangovers,
people will drink.
People will drink, and that's bad for whatever reason. They think. Well, I think the argument is beginning to turn the other way, because really, if you eliminate hangover, people drink anyway. I think it's the longest running study in human history. It has been running for tens of thousands of years. Is that people drink?
So do animals.
So do animals. Yeah, I mean that's how actually that's how people first became alcoholics. Is well, at least that's the speculated theory, but
yes.
it sounds plausible, and it's the most plausible one out there. Is that initial apes, when we were still apes or had the similar ancestor to apes, we were sort of roaming around the jungle, going, ooh. It was like a Radovan ape. Like, I mean, can you imagine me swinging from a vine?
No, you were walking around the floor.
Well, not yet. At that point, still, swinging from vines and kind of tree branches. But I'm not an athletic person.
Yes.
So the Radovan ape sat on his branch and went, "Fuck, I can't be asked looking for food today. Is there a quicker way to find food?" And then Radovan put two and two together, and Radovan ape realized, well, I'm just going to follow the smell of booze, which was fruit that was ripe fruit that was beginning to turn, and as it turned, it started fermenting and it started turning into booze, and by following that smell, yes, some of the fruit was past its use by date, but a lot of other food around it was just prime ripe, and that's how you consumed food. So by smelling alcohol, it led you towards a full belly, and it works that way today still. But yeah, so really, if you research a hangover cure, so much economic benefit is going to come from the fact that people won't be coming to work hungover. Because I am sorry, employers, we don't tell you, but I've been hungover at work over the past 2 weeks, probably 4 days. Work hard, play hard, innit?
Welcome back to an all-new episode of the Just Some PS podcast. I am your host along this wild and crazy journey, the American Nick, joined as always.
The iron hand, it ain't no match for the iron
the man with a plan, the beer doctor himself, Radavan. Beer doctor, how goes it?
That was the incredible Bobby Dylan from his Toronto 1980 concert. The song is called When He Returned, which I thought, since after such a long absence, it felt like an appropriate song. But I didn't pick that one just for the name. It's also Bob Dylan. For those who are not too familiar with Bob Dylan, had a period between 1979 and 1981 where he refused to write any music that wasn't about God. This is called Bob Dylan's gospel period. All he played in his shows and all songs he wrote were about God, such as this one, which put a lot of people off. He used to. We can listen to it some later. Every show he used to interrupt with sort of 10-minute, and he had sermons and talked about the Middle East and the impending Armageddon, etc. It was all wonderfully just strange. But it's also a fantastically productive period for him, and there's a new bootleg series, new release of material from that era coming out next month. So yeah, people who do like Bob Dylan, I thoroughly recommend to check it out. Yes, the whole God stuff is off-putting, and it took me a while to get into it, but they're just, as you've heard now, they're magnificent songs. Anyway.
Wow. Moving on from a Nobel Prize winner.
Oh. Yes, although now we have a new one, Kazuo Ishiguro.
Yes. Want to play a game to start off.
Okay.
And it relates to two world leaders. And it's called Who Said What?
Okay.
And it's between Donnie Trump and Kim Jong Funky Haircut.
So, for those listeners unfamiliar with stuff, that's Nick is referring to Donald Trump, who's the president of the United States.
But apparently not the president of the U.S. Virgin Islands.
Really?
Well, he said, and I quote, "Today I met with the president of the U.S. Virgin Islands," when he was talking about the governor. Said, and I quote, "Today I met with the president of the U.S. Virgin Islands," as he's standing there with the governor.
But he did. I met myself today as well. I looked in the mirror.
How the fuck do you do that? How stupid are you?
Well, you misspeak.
Really?
I guess. And the other gentleman Nick was referring to was Kim Jong-un, hair model and ruler of North Korea.
All right. So it's a quiz. There's 8 questions. It's really easy, and I need you to tell me if you think it's Trump or Kim.
Go on.
There will never be a time that we are not the most powerful nation in the world.
I'll go with Donald Trump.
Donald Trump. Good start. U.S. President Donald Trump said on Twitter the 9th of August, "Hopefully we'll never have to use this nuclear power, but there will never be a time that we are not the most powerful nation in the world."
Ambitious.
All right. Number 2. He's a smart cookie.
That's Donald Trump. Kim Jong-un would never use the term
Perfecto.
cookie.
Here's what Mr. Trump said about Mr. Kim in an interview with CBS on 30th April. At a very young age, he was able to assume power. A lot of people, I'm sure, tried to take the power away, whether it was his uncle or anybody else, and he was able to do it. So obviously, he's a smart cookie. The military might of a country represents its national strength.
I'm still going with Donald Trump.
Sorry, but not this one. It came from Mr. Kim in a New Year's message in 2013. Military's might of a country represents its national strength. Only when it builds up its military might in every way can it develop into a thriving country. If we push the button to annihilate the enemies even right now, all bases of provocations will be reduced to seas in flames and ashes in a moment.
Poetic. I'm going with Kim Jong-un.
Correct. That was part of the statement released by the state-owned media on the 7th of March, 2016.
Hey.
Next up. Pause because for some reason...
I have that song in my head.
They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen.
Also poetic, but a bit testosterone-y, so I'm going to go with Donald Trump on that one.
Yes, correct.
Woohoo!
Sound dialogue is not possible with such a guy, bereft of reason, and only absolute force can work on him.
I mean, it must be really fun being Donald Trump's speechwriter. There's the amount of crazy shit you can just insert into there.
So you're saying Trump on that one?
Sorry, I'm saying... Oh, no, so that was the next quote.
Some dialogue is not possible with such a guy, bereft of reason and absolute force, and only absolute force can work on him.
Oh, I'm going with Donald Trump on that one.
Not this one. It came from North Korea's state media on the 10th of August in reaction to Trump's remarks that his country risked fire and fury.
I was on the...
Question 7.
Go on.
Sometimes by losing the battle, you find a new way to win the war.
That's again whoever said this is my new hero, because there's a brilliant. I mean, speaking of Bob Dylan, which I will keep on bringing up because I love Bob Dylan. There's a brilliant line from his song "Idiot Wind" about his soon-to-be ex-wife. She doesn't come across very well in that song. But anyway, there's a brilliant line going, "There's a lone soldier on a hill, slowly watching the raindrops pour. You'd never know it to look at him, but at the final shot he won the war after losing every battle."
And so, you're saying it was?
I don't want Donald Trump to be my new hero, so I'm going to go with Kim Jong-un. And I realized what I just said. But anyway.
We don't think Mr. Kim is on Twitter, so this came from the U.S. president who tweeted on the 23rd of May, 2014, "Sometimes by losing the battle, you find a new way to win the war. Don't ever get down on yourself. Just keep fighting. In the end, you win."
All right, so Donald Trump is officially my new hero. Go on.
And the 8th and final question. Let us bring about a radical turn in the building of economic giant with the same spirit and mettle as were displayed in conquering space.
Again? I don't really understand.
Let us bring about a radical turn in the building of an economic giant with the same spirit and mettle as were displayed in conquering space.
I mean, the poetry makes me think Kim Jong-un, but I'm not sure North Korea has conquered space, or the US for that matter, but the US actually put stuff in space. I'm going to go with Donald Trump.
No, not him. That came from Mr. Kim's New Year address in 2013.
Wow. How did North Korea conquer space?
No, they're saying of conquering space. So similar to that thing. They didn't conquer space, but he probably told the people they did. So actually, you got 4 out of 8.
Yeah, that's a bit disappointing.
But that's the curiosity that comes about with somebody who we know is deviant in his thought patterns, is
which one?
Self-absorbed. He's very critical when it comes to anyone critiquing him, lashing out. Wow, I'm really describing both of them right now.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure which one. I was waiting for you to do the traditional comedic gambit when you finish describing and saying, and the other is Donald Trump or Kim Jong-un.
But I couldn't.
Yeah, it works with both. Yeah.
I was going down the wrong path because they were both that way. And they are that way. So over the course of the last, say 2 weeks since our last show aired, horrific events have taken place. Bad things have happened. Las Vegas shooter.
I've missed it all.
Yeah, Radovan's been in a hole because he's been working for the last 2 weeks, roughly 80 hours a week.
Yeah, I was on a holiday as well. Before that, and then where?
True. So we can start off on October 1st, 2017. A 64-year-old man named Stephen Paddock from Mesquite, Nevada, fired hundreds of rounds from multiple rifles from his suite on the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay, killing, I think it's around 60 now. It was 50 at the time, injuring 546. To put this in perspective for people that don't understand mass shootings, because I don't think it's in the U.S. It's an unfortunate reality that you just get used to mass shootings. It's almost a part of a weekly occurrence. It just happens.
Yeah.
So, to put this in perspective, 58 to 60 people killed, 546 injured, and it took place from 10:05 until 10:15.
Fucking hell.
So it took 10 minutes to cause that kind of carnage.
600 casualties. Counting injured and
dead. It was...
That's like World War One
Normandy type
efficiency,
shit. Yeah, like this is entering the field of battle as bad things are occurring. It re-raised a global debate in the U.S. It's a U.S. debate, but it's a global debate on whether or not, people need guns, and, it's part of the First Amendment, and the NRA spends so much money on funding the U.S. government, basically.
Yeah.
Now, the gun owners in America constantly go back to the Second Amendment rights to bear arms, which, the country was founded on this document. As we've said numerous times, even the writer of the documents said it was an interesting experiment. We'll see how it turns out. But I don't think that 99.9% of them have ever read the actual U.S. Constitution. And before the Bill of Rights, it says a lot of important stuff, like the building of the country and how it's going to go. And see, the Constitution has what's called a preamble. Now, for those uneducated people...
It's like a prequel.
Yes. It's basically an outline of what the entire document's going to talk about. So consider it, for most Americans, think of it as a trailer for an upcoming film. It's the easiest way to describe it.
For the scientifically minded, consider it an abstract.
Exactly.
For the business minded amongst you, executive summary.
Exactly. So it clearly states, and it's written in a way to where it's very encompassing. It covers all aspects of what to look forward to in this document to understand what the building blocks are of this new nation. And it states, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America. Okay, now it says a lot of big words and a lot of funky things, but let's kind of break it down. In order to form a more perfect union. Okay, bring everyone together. Understandable, it's easy. We want everybody to be part of a union. Establish justice. Okay, well, we got to have some kind of law enforcement that's not killing black people for no reason. Just some sort of law enforcement so I can't go over to Radovan's house and steal all of his shit. Ensure domestic tranquility. Okay, so peace throughout the nation. A calming sense. MAGA, make America great again. Provide for the common defense, which the U.S. does, spending more than the next 26 countries combined, 25 which are allies. Promote the general welfare. Now, this is an interesting one, because if you're on the right, you say everybody should take care of themselves. God damn it, I don't want my tax dollars going to helping anybody who's less fortunate. But they'll really boast about their Second Amendment rights, which is farther down in the line that says, give me my goddamn guns because the Constitution says so. Constitution says promote the general welfare. And kind of one of the most important ones that I think when it comes to this is general welfare also, from a broad sense of it, would be healthcare. The welfare of a human being. Am I off base by saying that? Because you could think of welfare check. If someone's going to do a welfare check, you haven't heard from them sometime, you send somebody over. I haven't heard from Radovan in a couple of weeks. I call up Metro, tell them to do a welfare check. They kick in the door and they find him strewn drunkenly across the floor. At least I know he's alive.
Yes.
Also, mentally, physically.
But you could always fall back on the Bible if you don't think the Constitution is saying that. It always strikes me as funny that these people generally are also, very own the Bible, I guess. I'm not going to say as far as read it, but own it and believe in it.
But it's curious, because this is the problem that I've always had with the people that put so much stock in the Bible, is the Old Testament doesn't matter. Yeah. It didn't happen.
Yeah.
It's only the New Testament.
As far as Christianity is concerned, yeah.
Yeah.
Old Testament is... It's kind of like Iceland, in a way. It's the trialing ground. It's let's try to make out a book out of this, see if there's any lessons. Didn't quite work out. Let's do the New Testament with serious effort, and that's how the rest of the world was made. Whilst Iceland is this sort of mishmash of everything that doesn't quite make sense.
But it's weird, is because in every aspect they don't want to talk about the Old Testament at all, except for when it comes to creationism. And then it was God created the world in 7 days.
But they also don't want to really talk about the New Testament with whole. It's basically it's a socialist manifesto.
Yes.
I mean, the Jesus
bit of a socialist
is. I mean, but
people call Bernie a socialist.
Bernie Sanders is like Herod compared to Jesus.
Oh, I know. That's the funny running joke.
Anyway, back to your reading of the U.S. Constitution.
It boggles my mind. So we get to the shooting and we bring it back to the NRA. So it's similar to the Bible. That was a great kind of segue in. It's a pick and choose what parts they want to believe and stand behind, which fundamentally I can't understand. After the shooting in my office, every single person asked me, well, why do they have guns? Like, what's the purpose? Especially of like an AR-15 or something like this, any semi-automatic, which any moron that has Google can go on and try to find how to turn a semi-auto into an auto. It's not difficult to do. It's actually not.
Yeah.
In this country, I have no desire at all to be Googling that kind of thing, because I'll end up on a lot of lists that I'm probably already on if you look at the predictive text on this. But I constantly have this debate with people that I'm quote unquote friends with in the U.S. is, if you're such a bad shot that you need a semi-automatic weapon to defend your home and family, because that's what it is, stand my ground. I have the right to defend my home and family. If you need a semi-automatic weapon to do that, because you're such a shitty shot that you can't hit them the first time you pull the trigger, maybe not get a gun, maybe practice. Everybody says do something 10,000 times. If you do something 10,000 times, you can be an expert at it, no matter what it is. Maybe buy 10,000 rounds and get out there and shoot a target 10,000 times.
In all fairness, he did already complete his first 600 tries.
Covering that doesn't really help, right? That didn't help at all.
We'll cut that. So 9,400 to go. He'll get there.
No, he shot himself.
Oh yes, yeah, I forgot that. But well, he can get there in heaven, I guess. Yeah, but this is it's a broader debate, and this is why I'm not a big fan of idolatry when it comes to texts. And this happens. This is not. I mean, people people complain about the Bible or the Quran or any other holy book there is, and the fact that people treat it literally, etc., and say we're not like that. But it's the same thing with the U.S. Constitution, which is I'm not a fan of Constitution. It's idolatry. Yes, the Constitution was written in the 18th century for the world of the 18th century. They could not have predicted the internet, etc. People progress. So that mindset that somehow we should cling on to the social values and standards we had in the 18th century, despite the fact that since then we have had almost 300 years of scientific thought, innovation, progress, and ignore that and cling on to the 18th century, you're not a patriot, you're not a conservative, you are Amish if you do that. You are Amish because that's what the Amish do. They stick rigidly to the 18th century and think times were good then, we're sticking to that. Do so, yes, fine, cling on to your constitution. If you refuse to evolve it, if you refuse to accept that the world has changed and perhaps you need to document that reflects the world we live in now, today, not in the 18th century, mate, switch off your electricity and stop going outside and you know, protect your women with chastity belts. I don't know. But that's just crazy to me. That's the first thing. Second thing, that I read an absolutely brilliant Onion headline, which was, no way to prevent this, says only nation where this regularly happens. Which kind of just sums it up. I mean, and the whole, you know, for anyone who has ever uttered those infamously gross, frankly, words, guns don't kill people, people kill people, I don't want to encourage you, but I mean, if you're going to shoot, I'm speaking to our core audience of prospective mass shooters here. Cletus, how you doing? I give you a challenge. When you go on to do your mass shooting, I want you to, because I believe that, I guess you also belong to this, you know, people don't kill people, the guns don't kill people, people kill people group. I give you a challenge. Don't use the gun. And go onto the top of your hotel and start throwing out kitchen knives. And tell me that it's not guns that kill people, that people kill people, because I have a slight suspicion that if that man was throwing kitchen knives rather than, you know, shooting with an automatic rifle, probably wouldn't have hurt anybody.
It was
people would still, and that not even hurt anybody. People would still be today alive rather than dead, which is not. I woke up really hungover this morning. It's the closest to death I've ever been. It's not a nice feeling. You don't want to be dead, and that's really awful that people are dead unnecessarily because somehow a group of, I would imagine, pretty drunk men in the 18th century,
and high, because they did grow marijuana,
wrote a line about guns
that originally was written on hemp paper.
Completely completely oblivious to the world that was going to exist 250 years later.
It's the worst for me, being a Yank in King Arthur's court, is the following weekend. I make it a point now to take Lily out for long walks. She's in season, so she can't go play in the park because every boy dog in the world wants to hump her, and she wants to get humped by every boy dog in the world. Horrible having a teenage daughter. It's just frustrating as hell. So we take long walks.
Can't you just use a Myrena coil or something? It works on people. It probably works on dogs.
No, I'm not putting her through that. So we ended up near the Natural History Museum in West London.
Mm-hmm.
An hour after we walked.
So that was you.
An hour later, after we walked by there, actually not even an hour, about 45 minutes, we're still walking down that main drag towards High Street, Kensington. An individual was hit by another individual, like in his car. The car, he lost control of, it careened off and ended up hitting a couple people.
Yeah.
Horrible thing. Not intentional. Wasn't a terrorist attack. Wasn't anything like this.
Depends on who you ask.
Exactly. Not even joking. I had to go and corner some guys just after that. So I'm heading to Chiswick. I'm on the train and I'm reading through Twitter. And so I pull it up. And all these Trump snowflakes, I don't know what to call them, because if you attack Trump, you're a bad person and you shouldn't say anything. So they're snowflakes. They just can't handle the truth. We're saying, ban cars. For car accidents? It happens in the U.S. constantly. It happens in the U.S. more than anywhere else in the world. So I don't understand how a car accident... What it is because they have nothing to... They don't have a leg to stand on. And whenever you back somebody into a corner and you put them to where they don't really have a defense, they automatically lash out at whatever they can jump on. And so they see this incident, assume the worst because, well, something really just bad happened to their friends because their friends are gun owners and they own guns. Oh, no, look, cars are just as bad. We should be banning cars. Well, then I thought about that for a second. Now, as a driver of a car in the U.S., you have to be licensed. Now, part of that license, they look at your medical records. If you have any kind of condition, which you go to the hospital for, narcolepsy, epilepsy, anything that might cause, issues. If you're considered to be an alcoholic by your doctor, i.e. you copious amounts of alcohol, so it's caused degenerate things to your liver or something, they can refuse you a license. Yet a gun owner says they should not be licensed. Well, if a car owner has to be licensed, why shouldn't a gun owner license? And it goes back to the debate, well, people drive without a license all the time. Well, obviously you shoot people without a license as well, so it's going to continue to happen. So, if you want to ban the cars, let's license the gun owners. Let's make sure that they're trained. They must be tested. This way you don't have to have a semi-automatic weapon because, well, you can hit a target with one shot, not 50.
It's just the whole thing is false equivalence. Cars have a predominantly beneficial use. I mean, you can talk about the environment, etc., fine. But the purpose of cars, they were invented because it was a thing that would produce positive results. It facilitates transport from one location to the other, so you can spend time with your family,
polishing your guns,
parents, kids, see a new part of the world, educate yourself. That's the purpose of cars. I mean, guns, yes, I guess you can use them on your family, and sometimes you wish to, but they don't really have a positive effect. You can talk about security, you can talk about protection, but that's what the police and the army are there for. I mean,
you pay taxes for a reason.
You can do hunting. You don't need an automatic rifle for hunting. And as you were saying earlier, 10,000 tries. If you're trying to protect your home with a bazooka, do I even need to finish that sentence?
Let's move away from
what else has happened, Nick?
The horrible riot.
You've cheered me up to no end.
Well, I'm actually going to, and because you're hungover, this might not be the breakfast that you wanted, but it's the breakfast that you need. It seems like every week now we're talking beer news.
Oh, what has happened?
So, a Boise brewery, that's Boise, Idaho, in the United States.
Oh, right. I had all sorts of images in my head. Why would you call a place that? Anyway.
Pyatt Brewing releases Sunday morning, MOURNING, Imperial Breakfast Stout.
Okay.
It's more than just a beer. It was a fun collaboration with Ironside Roasting Company, a small batch craft coffee roaster in Boise, Idaho. Now, Pyatt and Ironside worked together for this unique beer and coffee creation. Both being a master at their craft, they know that combining their techniques and using quality ingredients would make an exceptional beverage. Sunday morning, Imperial Breakfast Stout is brewed with barrel-aged coffee beans, which were then used for the Ironside Roast Monday morning barrel-aged Sumatra. So, over in Boise, the craft beer scene is ever expanding, and they decided that they were going to make a coffee-flavored beer for breakfast.
Well, a breakfast stout is a beer style.
Yes.
And, from the... you might not know this, listeners, but before Nick and I started Tinder, we we worked for this beer app, website type thing, and we did some videos. We also did a podcast, but also did some videos. And one I've always wanted to make and regret never making was a breakfast stout video where, we'd have a breakfast stout and some cereal and put it in a bowl, and then I'd eat full bowl of 13% breakfast stout with cereal for breakfast. It would make an amusing 10 seconds, but it would be an experience of a lifetime.
Okay. Consider it booked. We shall film it. I'm not sure. I'll need to get something to lay down on my floor for when you spit it up. And
I think it could. I mean, breakfast stouts are generally quite good, and I think with some muesli, it could be quite flavorful.
Okay. Well, that's something to look forward to then from the blast from the past to Perfect Pie. Now, with everything that is going on in the world, sometimes I just want news that just makes me say, what the fuck? Like, I just need to read something and go, what the fuck?
That's why we text, Nick.
True. A man who lived with the decaying bodies of his dead mother and twin brother for more than a year said he didn't report their deaths because he was traumatized. What the fuck? Robert James Cooper, 60, was charged last week by police in White Bear, Minnesota, with interference with a dead body or scene of death, a misdemeanor, according to Inside Edition. The living situation came to light in September of 2016 when neighbors asked police to check on the residence. Responding officers said the house had a stench of decay, and they found skeletal remains of his mother upstairs in her bedroom and the mummified corpse of his twin brother in the basement.
Did he mummify him?
Autopsy on the bodies showed that both died of natural causes. I was traumatized. What would you do? I'm not some nutball people think I am, but I'm not. I loved them.
I mean, honestly, smell and disgustingness aside, I can't quite see how they could possibly charge him with interfering with a dead body when what he did is the exact opposite of that. He kind of just kept them there intact. Burying them is interfering with a dead body.
Well, police initially accused Kufler of financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, but apparently lacked evidence to support the charge and dropped it. Police Captain Dale Hager told the AP the disability and social security checks for Kuffler's mother and brother were directly deposited to their bank accounts, but it did not appear any money was ever withdrawn. Kuffler told the AP he did not tap the accounts. So, here's the thing. Disgusting.
Mm-hmm.
Horrible. But still, what the fuck? Like, I don't, like...
I'm
That's why I'm a bit... Because when I read it, I just went, what the fuck? Because you read the headline and you think, oh, Jesus Christ, it's like fucking Ed Kemper or something like that, having sex with his mom's dead skull that he just cut off. But it wasn't that. It was... he could have been to the point where he just didn't know how to react to it, didn't have the verbal capabilities to put out there that something really bad happened and I don't know how to take care of it.
I mean, one question. They didn't die at the same time, did they? So who was in on it first? I mean, was the brother happy that they kept their mother in bed, or was the mother happy that they had a mummified son brother in the basement?
See, Cooper said he told police he found his brother dead in a chair and eventually moved the body to the basement as it was in the way.
Yeah.
He told investigators he knew his mother was dying but didn't want to be around when she died, so he left the house to drive around for a couple hours. She was dead in her bed when he returned.
So sounds she was bedridden and didn't even know that. Fair enough. Well, I mean, it's a philosophical debate more than anything. I mean, who does a dead body belong to after it dies? Does it belong to the heir, which he would be?
And so, really, what was it? If they don't find anything to where he was malicious in killing them, i.e. he caused their death in any way, and also he didn't do it for financial gain because they've proven that he didn't actually get any of the Social Security money that was going to his mother or his brother.
Yeah.
I don't understand what the charge is other than it's gross.
I mean, if it was like a health hazard, hygienic hazard, I can see it from that point of view. But
it's just a horrible. It's a horrible case of hoarders.
Yeah. Wow. All right. I can't top that one, so
I kind of figured that one would get you. All right, with that said, that's a lot of the news of what's been going on in a couple of weeks. What do you got for me?
I've got some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I've got some feel good stories.
Oh, I love feel good stories from you because there's no feel or good.
The first story which I came across is pause. I need to find the name. Right. 3, 2, 1. The first in our series of uplifting story is one of Robert Morin, who had been the librarian at the University of New Hampshire Library for decades, since the 50s, basically, when he was a student at the University of New Hampshire for years, because he was the first member of his family to get a third tier education, so college, university, but he couldn't afford it, so it took him years to actually graduate, because he had to frequently drop out, earn some money, then go back, continue studying, drop out, earn some money. So this was a very ambitious man. And after this, he became a librarian, and was a librarian for over 40 years, at this single library in University of New Hampshire. And he was a very frugal man, apparently very kind, but uncontroversial, refused to talk about any, I was happy to do small talk, weather, etc., sing a random tune, but he refused to sort of stray into any controversial topic. Didn't talk politics, didn't talk family. He was just doing his job. He had clearly some sort of obsessive compulsive elements. He had, once VCR came out in 1979, he bought a VCR and watched 3 to 4 films a day. By the end of his life, he claims to have seen 21,000 films. Wow. According to the notes he has kept.
He kept notes on how many films he watched?
Yes. Then he also was a voracious reader. After finishing watching all the films ever made, clearly, he decided to read trade publications chronologically, starting from the year 1930, and he read U.S. trade publications for whatever. So clearly obsessive compulsive, but generally a kind, gentle soul, and lived very frugally. So used to have a sandwich for lunch, and that was it. Didn't go out much, didn't spend much. Where do you think this is going?
Well, there's two trains of thought. It could go to he left millions to charity, to the library, and things will go well. Or it could go to, they found, 47 co-eds buried in his basement. Like, there's a huge spectrum on where it could go from here.
Yeah, if you were a gambling man.
The gambling man, I'd probably go with, because of the way my mind works, serial killer.
That's your domain, Nick. By the end of his life, Robert Morin saved up to $4 million.
Wow.
Which he, in his will, bequeathed to the University of New Hampshire.
Yep.
To preserve the library. So the University of New Hampshire spent, I think it was between $120,000 to $150,000 on the library.
Okay.
And of that $4 million, spent $1 million to buy a scoreboard for their new stadium.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Their argument being that it was in the spirit of what Robert wanted, because towards the end of his life he sometimes watched sports. So he would have liked them to spend a quarter of this man's life savings, which he donated to the University of New Hampshire, to spend on the library. In all fairness, he only donated some part of the money for the library. The rest he encouraged them to use in whatever way benefited the university.
Apparently a scoreboard is what benefited the university.
And in their defense, they did say they spent $2.5 million on encouraging people from impoverished backgrounds to come into university, blah, blah, blah. Still doesn't change the fact that you spent $1 million of this man's life savings. He had sandwiches for lunch for decades. You spent it on a scoreboard for your new stadium. It was.
Oh my God! You can't.
It was.
You can't. You'll never understand universities' mindsets when it comes to how they think that they can make money off of college athletes who, if they ever take a penny for anything, the NCAA bans them for life from being able to participate in said sports. But universities across the U.S. make billions, not millions, billions of dollars every year off of these athletes.
I never quite understood this sort of college sports thing in the States. I'm old fashioned. I believe in the Constitution. I'm of an 18th century mindset, and to me, universities generally tended to be about education, not an entertainment circuit. But anyway, from one university to another.
It's the college break.
It's the college break. Yeah. Universities have started in the time we were gone. So welcome all you freshers. Our new listeners must be literally, I hope, at least one. A new study in University of Miami and Cletus. You might not want to hear this. Nick, perhaps you as well. A new research study has shown that to quote. Losers are more likely to believe in conspiracy theories. Sounds worse than it actually is. Don't worry, you're not a loser. Although it comes across like that, as in loser in life. But basically the study was revolving around the 2012 US election. And basically the belief in voting fraud.
2012 or 2016?
2012.
So people thought there was fraud in the...
Well, no, people didn't, because basically what he said is the study compared, do you think there's going to be voting fraud? A survey before the election and then after. Before the election, it was over 65% people believed that there was going to be voting fraud in the 2012 election before the election. After the election, only 39% believed there was voting fraud. And exploring these groups and results before the election, more people were fearful that their side was going to lose. And they felt that if their side loses, then there must have been voting fraud. After the election, one side won, which is what slashed that 65% to 39%, because only the people who actually lost the election believed there was voting fraud. Hence the headline, losers believe in conspiracy theories.
Could it go back to the fact that, that's still a large chunk out of that 64%, 39%. It didn't drop in half. So does that mean that the right, the conservatives, are a bigger core group of conspiracy theorists?
No, they actually controlled for that.
Mm-hmm.
They found that both groups were equally likely to believe in conspiracy theories. What happened is that 65% before was evenly spread, but what happened after the election, some people who before the election didn't think there was going to be voting fraud, now that they've lost, were convinced that there was voting fraud.
Okay.
So that explains the slight discrepancy in the numbers.
Okay.
So that's that. From one university to the Philippines. Do you know much about the Philippines?
I had an ex who was first generation U.S. Her parents were from the Philippines. Her grandmother lived in a house that didn't really have floors. It was just dirt. They had an outhouse. Did not have indoor plumbing. Did not have actual electricity. Something like 65% out of the year. Yeah, I know.
It's not a pleasant place. I mean, we'll cover Philippines in detail when we get to the Philippines in 2020.
But the Philippines is... yeah, you broke me there. The Philippines, it's weird because it's kind of split in half. Because you have the traditional Catholic that were originally there that came in, settled, converted everybody to Catholicism, and now they have a large percentage of Muslims. And it's almost a complete split now as far as how many people follow Catholic beliefs to how many people follow Islam. So it makes for an interesting dichotomy, also to the fact that, let's just be completely honest, they're right in the middle of Hurricane Central, and it's already a horrible place to be when it comes to mudslides.
Yes, it's also a horrible place to be if you're a person. I mean, President of Philippines Rodrigo Duterte is, in many ways, the Filipino Donald Trump.
Well, he did say, what did he say? Cletus, I know your brother's probably gay, and you just haven't come to terms with it. But didn't he say something like fags should be killed?
He said many things. He also declared a war on drugs so that he could rid himself of his political opponents, who all of a sudden started showing up with drugs everywhere. So it's not... I just realised what I said. Mr. Duterte is a very able politician, and who will surely bring prosperity to the Philippines. Although...
Let's be honest, he couldn't get over here.
For our users... Mr. Duterte, you can stop listening now. The episode is over. Doop-de-doop-de-doop. That was the podcast. Right? For those of you remaining, Philippines has a few teething problems. It's not exactly a functioning country. But, look, we all live in dysfunctional countries, and we all complain about things like you were saying earlier, there's universal healthcare in the States. They're not spending money on properly sorting out healthcare. Here we have problems with
Brexit,
welfare, social welfare. Yeah, but we complain that there's not enough money being put into social welfare. That the education department doesn't have enough funding to actually properly educate people, which some fringe elements of society believe is important. But to all you, as most things in life, our problems are relative. Now, thank your chosen deity, or whatever it is that you thank when you thank people, that your education department, your healthcare, etc., is not the Human Rights Department in the Philippines, which for the year 2018, guess what its budget allocation was?
50 quid?
Settle down, Rockefeller. $20. Not 20,000. 20. The Commission of Human Rights in the Philippines, in a parliamentary vote that passed by over 100 votes in I think 170 member parliament, 119 votes to 32. So a landslide. The Commission for Human Rights in the Philippines has been allocated the 2018 budget of $20. So yeah, let's get everyone a McDonald's breakfast meal. Call that a day.
No,
can't even book a room for that.
No, it's 3 ramens for £1. So you're gonna end up with 60 ramens?
But yeah, so at least education in this country or healthcare in the States is not
that
bad. I've got more than $20 to operate on. On a hilarious digression, this website I found the story on has this little thing on the side which I'm showing Nick. I'm not showing you because you didn't bother showing up, listeners.
I'll put a link in the thing as long as you send me that.
There's a little thing on the side. There's a side panel next to the article, and it's this website tries to do like a more interactive news story, I guess. And they have, how does this story make you feel? And you have buttons. of various moods. So you have 80% people are angry that at this article, and I understand why. I mean, it is a travesty in many ways, considering that Philippines doesn't exactly have a, as we've alluded to earlier. I'm sorry, I was going to say something. I was going to say something true. What I'm going to say instead is that the Philippines have a stellar record on human rights. But anyway, 80% of the people reading this...
It's stellar horrific.
80% are angry.
Yeah.
3% are sad. It is sad.
Yeah.
2% are annoyed.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess that it is annoying. 1% are afraid. That's the readers from the Philippines.
Actually, probably not, because they got ISP there. They're like, oh fuck, I ain't even gonna put afraid there. It might be a human rights violation.
Well, we'll get to that group. 3% don't care. I mean, I can see that if you're,
Donald Trump.
Shit happens everywhere. So maybe you don't care about what's happening in the Philippines. Fair enough. 1% are inspired by this article, so that's Donald Trump. Like, oh shit, you can do that. That's Donald Trump and Theresa May are inspired by this.
I hope that was an accidental button click.
I don't know. 3% are amused.
Oh Jesus, for fuck's sake.
So that's my homies.
Yeah. That's your crowd.
It's twisted, but it is. It'll be amusing, isn't it? A whopping 7% are happy.
Oh, for fuck's sake. Those are the people that live in the Philippines that just went, press the happy button. And the grandma's like, And the kids are going, happy grandma, otherwise they're going to come here. They know we're on this article. They're reading us right now. Press the happy button.
They're the people who have been nodding vigorously as I've said that the Philippines have a stellar record on human rights.
It was probably the parliament. It was the 119 people that voted yes, went, yes, I'm happy with this.
Our final feel-good story.
Okay.
Make
me happy.
It takes us back home to England, to Dorset. No, to Wiltshire.
I don't know where that is.
It's next to Dorset.
Okay.
It takes us to Wiltshire,
yeah,
where a group of piglets were rescued by firefighters from a burning barn building. The barn was on fire, but the firefighters managed to get there on time, and all the piglets were rescued.
Awesome. Uh-oh.
So, to thank the firefighters,
oh, for fuck's
the
sake,
farmers slaughtered all the piglets and turned them into sausages and gave them to the firefighters. I'm clicking happy on that one. It's horrible.
What?
I feel inspired.
Hold on. Okay, so...
Could have just left them in the fire and
hold on. So the barn's on fire.
Barn's on fire.
Fire trucks show up.
Yeah.
They risk life and limb. They rush in. They save these piglets' lives. The farmer, because he's so grateful, slaughters said piglets, turns them into sausages, and gives them to the firefighters for saving the piglets.
And the firefighters loved it so much they made a Facebook post about it, how grateful they were and how they enjoyed the sausages. And that's how it reached the media, because people read that and reacted much like you are reacting right now. Nick is trying to gouge his eyes out.
I'm fucking lost. I don't... Every time we do this exercise, which is the JSBS pod, which can be found at jsbspod.com, feel free to send us an email, jsbspod@gmail.com. Give us money at patreon.com/jsbspod. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Just use the name JSBSpod. Every time we do this, I lose a little bit more faith in humanity. Please tell me that your story is going to restore a bit of faith in humanity.
My story?
Yes.
I was born on the sunny Monday, I think it was. What do you mean, my story?
Your story for today about your in-depth study.
Oh, our person.
Yes.
Our mental health person.
Yes. Is it going to bring apart hope and triumph like the Chang twins, or those twin girls that were absolutely bonkers?
I'll let the story speak for itself.
Okay.
It starts with one Clark Wiley, a World War II flight mechanic. Starts much like many of your stories starts. But this story is not about Clark. We need to start with Clark to understand the origins of this story, which have brought tremendous advances to the field of neuropsychiatry.
Okay.
In terms of understanding how speech forms, and at what age the brain can learn language, can learn to communicate, etc. So from that aspect, it's a positive story. And I think only from that aspect. We're starting with Clark, flight mechanic. Not really a stand-up guy. He's married to his wife. His father died was struck by lightning.
Lucky guy.
Yeah, and died. His mother ran a brothel, which is where Clark grew up. He wasn't called Clark initially. His mother gave him a female name for which he was bullied and derided a lot of his childhood, until he eventually broke free of his mother and changed his name to Clark, and got himself a job, got himself a wife. Clark was mentally scarred by his childhood experiences. Their mother didn't really care for him much. He loved her intently, but hated her at the same time, as you do as a child with abusive parents or an abusive parent. And because of that, Clark didn't want to have children.
Okay.
Perhaps no one knows why some might know why he decided not to, but there's perhaps some degree of insight where he realized
I can genetically pass this on.
I'm probably not father material. Clark had, because of his traumatic childhood, Clark had many issues, one of which progressively got worse as he got older, one of which was a severe phobia of sounds, of loud noise. He couldn't stand loud noise.
But he was an airplane mechanic.
World War II, he then retired. I think he pretty much just didn't do anything. He quit his job eventually because of his inability to tolerate noise. So, yeah. And this probably also contributed to the not wanting to have kids, but you can't control life. And so Clark and his wife had a child. Baby girl, healthy baby girl. Unfortunately, she was screaming. So Clark, to be away from the noise, took the little girl to their garage and kept her there, and she got pneumonia and died. Second child, Clark and his wife had died at childbirth, rhesus incompatibility, blood disorder, died. Nobody's fault. Third child, John.
Okay, why the fuck are they still having children?
Third child, John.
Contraceptive, no sex. I mean,
was born reasonably healthy. Clark did beat him and neglect him. when you're asking where's the mother in all this, the mother was a very passive person, and after a fall she suffered severe neurological damage which left her cataracts on both sides. She was practically blind. She couldn't function normally, which played well into Clark's hands because he was, as you are perhaps gathering, a control freak, manipulative control freak who everyone was living in his kingdom, so to speak. John, beaten, often neglected. For a while he lived with the grandmother, which was a happier time, so for a few years, at the time where Clark's fourth child was born, another baby girl, Genie. John went away, later came back after about a year and a half. Genie was... We don't know how Genie was, for the reason that when Genie turned 20 months, Clark's mother was run over by a drunk driver and was released on a community sentence. This filled Clark with intense rage at the injustice, at the loss of his mother, as you would, and he just went off the deep end. At that point he quit all his work he had left, moved the family to a two-bedroom house, and just kept them inside, isolated. He did not want to deal with the world. He did not want to deal with the noise of the world, whether the physical noise or the emotional noise. The little girl, Genie, not her real name, but she came to be known as Genie because of to protect her identity. Little Genie, when she was 20 months old, she was strapped to a potty, like a baby toilet type thing. She was strapped to a potty, and when I say strapped, I mean strapped. Clark built a custom-made harness where Genie was kept for 13 hours a day. Growing up, the room was dark, the windows were blackened. The only stimulus she had is slightly open windows through which she could see that wall of the house next door, a bit of the sky, and sometimes she could hear piano playing in the distance. Not that she would know what that is. Genie never left this room. Clark, the household was all silent because Clark didn't like noise, so he only whispered with his wife. He only whispered with John or beat him. Genie, locked away in her own room, was in his harness 13 hours a day. She could only move her fingers and her toes. She didn't get any stimulus. Clark frequently beat her whenever she made noise. As a child, when it's hungry, it makes noise. Fed her 3 times a day, but if she upset him, he didn't feed her at all. Sometimes for days on end. If she made a noise, he would come into the room, and he had a special plank and a baseball bat with which he would hit her. She only ate liquid food. She never was given solid food. As Clark got older and John got older, Clark would force John to administer the beatings. The mother was allowed to observe some of the feedings, but was never allowed to feed Genie herself. Although late at night, the mother sometimes would sneak into the room at around 11 p.m. and secretly feed Genie, particularly if she wasn't fed that day, which led Genie to develop, for the rest of her life, a bizarre, well, not for the rest of her, for a long time, a bizarre sleeping pattern where she would sleep between 7 and 11, then wake up at 11, even when she wasn't in this situation, and good thing is she wasn't in it for all her life. She would wake up for a bit at 11 because that's when the mother used to come, and then she'd go back to bed and sleep another 6 hours. At night, she was tied in a sleeping bag and placed in a cot onto which John built a metal cage top, so she was effectively in a cage. And then during the day, she was kept in the harness, or she couldn't move. She wasn't taken to the toilets, etc. She wasn't ever spoken to. No one ever talked to her. There are suspicions of sexual abuse because later on in life, Genie would randomly start masturbating in public with people inappropriately at inappropriate times, but nothing's ever been admitted or proven. We're fast forwarding a few years. Clark and his wife made an arrangement that when Genie turned 12, she would be allowed to leave the house. Genie did turn 12, and Clark reneged on that agreement and refused to allow her to leave. At this point, John ran away from home and lived with his friends and refused to have anything to do with. John was 5 years older, so he would have been 18 at this point. The mother one day was so upset by this treatment that finally straw, camel's back, etc. She had a big argument with Clark and said, if you don't let me at least call my parents and let my parents see the granddaughter, I'm leaving. So he finally said, all right. So when she was 13 and a half years old, Genie left the house for the first time in her life. She walked at distance for the first time in her life. Her mother wanting to go to grandparents, they went to pause. Right. 3, 2, 1. She was 13 and a half. She finally left the house for the first time, walked at distance greater than between the bed and her potty harness. Her mother wanted to visit her the grandparents. Her parents first went, and this was LA, first went to the county welfare office because she wanted to see someone for her eyes, to see if they could do something about her cataracts, because she was blind. She took Genie with her so that, at least someone could see. Although Genie, incidentally, didn't see very far. Genie couldn't see anything beyond 3 meters because that was the size of the room. And she grew up in that room, and it's like with kids who read a lot end up being short-sighted. Mm-hmm. I'm one of those people. Your eyes, as you're growing up, accommodate to your distance you tend to look at the most. So as a child, if you read a lot or you play with your iPad a lot, you grow up short-sighted. She could only ever see as far as 3 meters. So as far as her body was concerned, it didn't need to see further. So she never learned. Everything beyond 3 meters was a blur. This great combination of mother with cataracts and a blind child, a blind mother with cataracts and a child that's severely short-sighted, meant that they couldn't actually find the office for the blind. Reckon someone at the LA County Welfare Office would have figured that out, that perhaps they should, have made the office for the blind a bit more clearer. They accidentally stumbled into social services, where the workers immediately noticed that something was off with this child, because she was walking in a funny rabbit kind of way. Mm-hmm. She walked like a rabbit because she didn't know how to walk. She was looking down. She wasn't saying anything. She was drooling. She was incontinent. They thought she was autistic. Asked the mother how old she is. The Genie was, because they assumed she was going to be 6 or 7 years old by the way she looked, because she was severely malnourished. And when the mother said the Genie is 13 and a half years old, red flags, alarm bells, anything that could make a noise in that social services office made noise, because this was not cool. This is where Genie enters life. She was immediately taken over, became a ward of the court. The parents were arrested. Mother later released because it wasn't her fault. It was abusive father. Father shot himself, as you do.
And here I was going to put him up for Father of the Year.
It was awarded posthumously.
All right, as long as he still got the medal.
Unfortunately, if that's the start you're given in life, the rest of it going to go very well. This was a rescue in terms of Genie's physical freedom, not a rescue in terms of mental. She was scarred beyond belief, as I said, incontinent, sniffing, explorative. She had the physical movement ability of a 1.5-year-old. She never moved in her life.
Mm-hmm.
So she didn't know how to walk. She didn't know how to crawl properly. From 20 months old, she did not move. The only thing she could move, they were surprised by her fine motor skills.
Mm-hmm.
So because she could actually move her fingers quite well, and the harness allowed finger movements. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. So yeah, and her mental age was estimated to be of a 2-year-old. To this day, the debate rages. This was when she was rescued. It was 1970. To this day, the debate ranges whether she was mentally retarded or whether she was normal, but severely, obviously, mistreated. Some doctors have diagnosed mental impairment, others haven't. A lot of researchers claim she was at least of average intelligence. She could communicate with drawing. She could draw complex storylines. She could not speak. She has never heard a word. The only words she knew when she was rescued, or rather, the only words she spoke a few months after her rescue was "stop it" and "no more." But she had, when they first started talking to her, she had this really high-pitched, squeaky voice because she didn't know how to speak. And this is where this sort of feral child, I mean, you hear about wolf children, and then there's the French boy from the 18th, 19th century, but this was a feral child in the middle of the States, in the middle of LA, appeared out of nowhere and from under anyone. So it was, for scientists, it was a phenomenal case study, and the National Institute of Mental Health provided funding to turn her into a case study. So effectively she became a test bunny, test rabbit. They tried to see, because this is someone who, for all intents and purposes, had no language. And at 13 and a half, they wanted to see how much they could teach her. So Genie started being adopted by first one researcher, then another researcher, and they went about sort of reintegrating her into society. Surprisingly enough, and this is where the distinction between the brain parts Wernicke area and Broca's area. Wernicke's area is kind of like middle of your headish. Broca's area is kind of at the top next to your temple, thereabouts. Wernicke's area plays a role in speech comprehension or language comprehension. Broca's area focuses on language production. Genie was a perfect test subject for this, but because as it turns out, Broca's area stops developing early on. Wernicke's area continues to develop and is fairly neurally plastic. So Genie actually learned to comprehend language and could sort of acquired quite a good vocabulary, but her grammar was non-existent. She couldn't learn grammar. She couldn't learn linguistic structure. She could communicate. So let me try to find this quote. The example of her, after this is a few years later, she finally managed to say this when she was asked about her childhood, about her captivity, so to speak. Father hit arm, big wood. Genie cry, not spit. Father hit face, spit. Father hit big stick. Father angry. Father hit Genie big stick. Father take piece wood hit. Cry, me cry.
She's 16.
She was about 14, 15, 16, at about this age. And that's as good as life got for Genie. In 1970, sort of towards the mid-70s, the funding ran out. National Institute of Mental Health decided this case. I mean, they got what they got out of her. They weren't going to get more. This case study isn't going anywhere. Researchers pleaded with them for more funding, but there was no scientific justification. So she lived in institutions for a bit. She lived with her mother for a bit, who got eye surgery, had the cataracts removed, and had lived with a new boyfriend. She was getting her life back together as well. But Genie, you couldn't handle her. This is as much she communicated, and she enjoyed playing. And the worst habits, the random spitting, the blowing the nose, the masturbation, the incontinence, they managed to get that under control reasonably well. Genie did actually start going to nursery school first, and then she did go to school for severely disabled children. But the world baffled her. The only music she could tolerate listening was classical music, hypothesized because of the piano. Other music didn't interest her. She liked exploring, she liked playing. She had no sense of property. She couldn't grasp the concept of ownership. To her, what's around her is hers and is everybody's. So she used to take things. There was a period where she enjoyed destroying things, like a child does. That was Genie. That was the level she was at after years of intervention.
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy to take care of someone like that. It's not a happy story where she becomes reintegrated into society. Genie was perplexed, utterly confused by most of the world around her. Eventually, the mother didn't work out, and she went through a series of foster homes. It wasn't the mother's fault, it wasn't Genie's fault, it just didn't work out. So she went through a series of foster homes, where in one of them she was physically abused, not sexually, but she was hit, she was beaten. There was a lawsuit, there was a big fracas between the researcher groups, accusing each other of exploitation. The mother stepped in, sided with one of them. Then there was a lawsuit between the mother and the researcher. The whole thing was a mess. Eventually, Genie disappeared and was put into a small private mental health institution where it's speculated she remains now. No one knows where she really is. She is fiercely protected, her privacy. Researchers don't have access to her. The state refuses to tell anybody where she is. They do send updates. She is apparently doing well in this facility. Her mother used to see her quite frequently until she died a few years ago. There was one researcher who was allowed to attend her 27th and 29th birthday parties. She reported an utterly uncommunicative, depressed, non-participating person. She regressed completely, lost all her vocabulary, didn't engage with the world. John, the brother, he married, had a daughter, who turned to drugs, and in turn neglected her two daughters. And there we are. He died a few years ago as well.
She was a cute kid.
She was found with double teeth, which is quite a rare condition, actually. But
she didn't look. I mean, she doesn't look like.
Yeah, no, she was.
Like, I don't know. All right. Well. So yeah, that's happy story. After that uplifting Father of the Year, we all have our demons and look back on. Some have worse than others. Yeah, I can't compete. I mean, I throw my hat in the ring quite a few times when it comes to living through hellish situations and dealing with stuff in your childhood. It's a good way to gauge life. Just remember, no matter how tough it gets, no matter how hard it is, people are dealing with worse shit than you could ever even imagine. Because I couldn't imagine anything that was this horrific. Like, I couldn't.
There's a silver lining, though.
And that is?
Thanks to Clark,
Yeah.
I can honestly say I wouldn't be the worst father in the world. So, if all this was at least some good derives from it, it's my comforting feeling that I wouldn't be that shit a dad.
All right. Well, like we like to do each and every week, well, unfortunately, for most people, the annual leave season is over, so planning for holidays just can't take place. But you start to think ahead, and you think, you know what? This past year, I wanted to go somewhere, but I only went to, Cornwall, or I only went to Ibiza, or I only went to Portugal. I only went to these places that, I didn't really know much about. Everybody was going, so I thought, you know what, I'm going to go there. So we bring in Radovan. And what Radovan does is he scours the globe, and he tries to find that one, that diamond in the rough, that gem, that place that next year, you know what, you got 3 weeks annual leave, book it now, book your flight, head out there. So we're going to go to the weekly travel report, I guess is what we say. So where should we be planning our holiday?
Diamond in the Rough is a brilliant example. It's a brilliant way to put it. And it is a dream holiday destination. Speaks English. Sunshine. Tropical temperatures. Beaches. Culture.
I'm on board.
It's got everything. Bring a stab-proof vest, and on top of that, a bulletproof onesie. We are going to Belize.
All right. Well, bring the suntan lotion. Bring the extra money for when you get shook down by the local authorities. And
I don't know what he's talking about.
And enjoy. All right. Hey, let's talk Belize.
Let's talk Belize. Give me a moment. I just need to reply to Jahan quickly.
That's a problem. You were supposed to meet her at 4, correct?
Yeah, I can push it a little bit.
Which cinema are you meeting her at?
It's just London Film Festival, so I think Cousin Soho, I think, is this one.
I don't know.
Right. Yes. So Belize, as we do always, we like to give a bit of context. Belize is actually quite a fascinating place. The history is, you can talk about it as much as you want, but you could also summarize it neatly. But it is interesting. Belize is the origin of the Mayans. They came there 2,500 years ago. That's where archaeological finds are from. Mayans, you might remember from essentially spanning the Yucatan Peninsula, Mexico, Guatemala, etc. But Belize is one of the ethnically and culturally and demographically most diverse countries in the world, actually. It didn't stay with just the Mayans, who enjoyed their heyday up until about 900. And then, I can talk about Mayans for ages, but, we're not really doing Mayans, so I'll
The Mayans could be... we'd have to sit down and go, okay, let's just do a 2-hour show about the Mayans, and it'd be a 4-parter.
Yes, but I think what we can do once we finish all the countries, we'll start doing countries that no longer exist, looking at you, Kosovo. So, yeah, Mayans, then the Spanish conquistadors came. And
what do we learn about the Spanish conquistadors, though? When they come in, what do they do?
Universal healthcare,
yes.
Education,
top notch,
infrastructure,
yep.
Death,
lots of it,
lots of death,
and death.
Then for you it's game over. Then they settle, but actually this didn't happen. Spaniards did come over, did declare Belize as a Spanish colony.
Okay, so part of the Spanish Empire,
but didn't actually settle. at all. There were no Spanish settlements in Belize because they thought the jungle is too thick, the tribes too hostile, and there's, more importantly, probably, there's nothing to get out of it. There was nothing in Belize.
Wait. So this is the first time in this exercise that we've done that someone showed up and been like, you know what, the natives? Nah, don't want to fuck with them. It's good.
Yeah.
We'll just own this place, but no.
So who steps in when even the Spanish conquistadors say, nah, sod this shit?
Well, I mean,
Who's more fierce than even the Spanish conquistadors? Who's more reckless than the Spanish? Who looks at a hostile Yucatan tribe and goes, yeah, go on, bring it?
well, that's always the British.
It's pirates.
Ah, the pirates.
It was British pirates,
Yes.
the Basemen. They settled Belize and turned it into their base from which they could sink Spanish ships, as one does. And funnily enough, so Belize de facto became a British colony, but it wasn't administered by the British government, and the British government didn't want to officially declare it a British colony for two reasons. A, they weren't really in control, it was run by the pirates, and B, they didn't want to piss the Spanish off, because Spain still considered it its colony, it's just they were too scared to actually colonize it. So what happened over 200 years, Belize was effectively a pirate origin republic. It was an independent state run by the British. They formed their own parliament there, as in not the British government, British people. They started their own parliament there. It was a self-governing society, which is admirable, really. And they sort of started exploiting the local timber, which, as it turns out, was useful A, as building material, B, as an adhesive, and B, as a dye as well. So quite profitable material, and they needed someone to cut the timber and do stuff to it. So slavery, and this so self-governing, but slavery.
Every time.
Lots of
Every time.
slavery, to the point where it's kind of, in 1782, the British government decided, well, we've lost the States, so we need to, beef up our investment portfolio, so Belize, actually ours. So they tried to they installed a governor, proclaimed it a British colony. The Spanish were like, well, after the Armada, like, staying away. So British took control, but still couldn't quite handle the local population, which was fiercely opposed to the abolishment of slavery. Britain abolished slavery empire-wide, but it took a further 3 decades to get Belize to agree to abolish slavery.
Cletus, these are your people.
After everyone got massively paid off by the British government, they were compensated like they had received the highest slavery abolishment compensation of the entire British Empire, the slave owners in Belize. And it actually, the slave owners of Belize freed the slaves and said, all right, slaves, jungle, see, which way do you want to go? Oh, you don't want to go, because you can't. So, there's some timber. You're no longer slaves, so here's a nickel. That's your monthly salary. So abolishing slavery in Belize didn't really abolish slavery in Belize. It went from slavery to late stage capitalism in one quick jump. So bypassing 300 years of history.
But we haven't learned. This is the same shit we do now. How the hell do we not learn from history?
Anyway, there was no great revolution. There was no great enlightenment. There came the Great Recession, the Great Depression, which kind of bankrupted the whole lumber industry.
Okay.
And Belize entered a shitty few years. Economic recovery came during World War II because a lot of men went off to fight and sent money back. After World War II, Belize had to kind of reinvent itself. and through a series of fortunate events, ended up gaining independence in 1981 because the British government just did not want to finance Belize. After the lumber thing, Belize wasn't profitable. They didn't want to finance it anymore, but they did want to make them sustainable, which Belizeans, after gaining independence, became quite sustainable. Most of their imports now coming from most of their economy producing is centered around natural gas, petroleum, bananas, fruit juices, raw sugar cane, that sort of thing. So, and tourism, I guess. Belize is because of its checkered history, Belize is phenomenally ethnically diverse. You still have the original Mayans living in Belize. You still have the Creoles, you have the Mestizos, you have the Garinagu, which are African or African origin people who never slaves. It's suspected that they're survivors of 2 shipwrecks who settled Belize. So they're kind of a weird group of people who live there as well. And then you have a large group of German-speaking Mennonites who moved away from Russia in the 18th to 19th century, and they form this is 5% of the population. They went to Belize.
Did they just get lost? Like, were they just like island? Let's go there.
They escaped persecution. This is where they said, and became Belize became an Anabaptist haven for whatever reason. Northern part of the country is there's also a big population of U.S. Anabaptists who emigrated in the 60s. But the German ones are they're white as white can be, and they speak German, and they live in Belize. And this is so while the official language of Belize is English, because of its origins, over 60% of the population are actually multilingual, and speak Spanish or all the other sort of dialects, German, American, etc. I'm not going to dignify you lot speaking the beautiful English language, what you have done to it. But yeah, it's an extremely diverse country. One last thing to say is every country has its friends. Mm-hmm. Every country has its enemies. Because of an infrastructure deal struck in 1859, Guatemala believes that Belize does not exist. And Guatemala maps published in Guatemala show Belize as the 23rd district of Guatemala. So there's some tensions there. Right, so what's happening in Belize? Pause. 3, 2, 1. Belize has an extraordinary crime rate. An extraordinary political corruption. And most of the news center around this. There was a Canadian woman who was murdered in Belize recently, and the police refused to investigate it. Rumors being that it was someone involved in politics who committed the murder, and therefore the police are not allowed to investigate. To the point where Canada has advised its citizens not to travel to Belize. And that kind of sums it up. A human rights activist and taxi driver was shot in the head on Friday evening as he was driving his cab. Police are investigating, and if you can't see me, I'm doing quotation marks. There was a Dutch man whose body disappeared a few days back, whose body was found in the jungle. Not quite sure what happened there. A US diplomat was speeding and drunk driving and crashed into a car, killing a family of, well, the family was of 4, killed mother and 2 daughters, and 1 daughter is still in hospital in a critical condition. And so the US diplomat was quickly taken to a hospital to be treated, and then to the airport, and then back to the States. Diplomatic immunity and all wasn't taken very well in Belize by
Okay, so as an American, don't go to Belize.
Yeah, generally North America don't go to Belize. Hold on, let me just. It's news. And there's, as you can sense, I mean, so this is the sort of news that are in Belize. I'll end up on a positive one. But before that, this is the sort of news you get from Belize, and scanning the news sites, I discovered something really surprising, which I don't think I've seen before. I mean, we've talked about, we've looked at the some of the Caribbean news outlets that have a very odd way of phrasing things and almost colloquial language, which as someone living in the UK, with the land of the BBC and the Sunday Times and the Telegraph and Financial Times and Guardian and whatnot, you are used to a very professional language coming from news, and in a lot of these Caribbean outlets, they speak in a very familiar tone, use words you'd use with friends, not
slang terms.
You wouldn't expect in not just slang terms, but the way the sentences are structured, and the fact that news articles often express direct opinions, whilst they should be reporting facts.
Okay.
So I found that's normally what I find. But every country will have a sort of BBC style or Guardian style outlet as well, or a few of them. Belize doesn't. They're all the news websites in Belize are extremely paranoid and hostile to the government and the police, and extremely conspiratorial. Everything they write about the police is you could just taste the sarcasm emanating from your laptop screen and flowing all the way over your clothes, etc. It's they hate the police, they hate the government. Every time a government wins a lawsuit, they go, "Oh, who did they pay off now?" sort of thing. It's like reading blogs of 15-year-olds who've just started watching The Daily Show with, Jon Stewart, what used to be, or something like that. It's incredible, the hostility, which reached the point where last week Belize media collectively started boycotting the police because of the hostile approach of the police and the sort of, they refused to hold press conferences, etc. So the Belize media just declared an all-out boycott of the police. It's bizarre. But as I said, ending on a positive note, the International Poultry Organization, the HACCP, or Caribbean Poultry Organization, has certified chickens from Belize to be as quality poultry and Caribbean chicken grade, which means that poultry from Belize can now be traded across the Caribbean.
Okay. As we like to do with all these small nations, and when we're, especially in the Caribbean, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being very difficult, 1 being very easy, where does this rate on the, if you want to take over a country?
Invadability.
Yeah.
Good point, Nick. Thank you for reminding me, because I did research this as well. if you're considering invading Belize, did you just not fucking listen? So let me spell it out explicitly. Don't invade Belize. They have an army of 900.
No, because everybody's corrupt, so that includes, you got to put the...
The official army is 900.
Yes.
The army of gangs and angry people. You'd be facing... They have fucking Germans there as well. As if that wasn't bad. They have religious Germans there. I mean, that... Don't fight those. They mean bastards. And they have gunshot wounds for old... He was 79, the taxi driver. Human rights activist. They shot him with a gunshot in the head as he was driving his cab on Friday. We're getting ready for the weekend. You don't want to... 900, you can tell yourself, well, if I gather a few mates, we can take Belize. You don't want to. All right?
All right.
All right.
All right. All right. All right. Be sure to go to iTunes, rate and review. You can find us on the web at jsbspod.com. Send us an email, jsbspod@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook, facebook.com/jsbspod. Twitter and Instagram @jsbspod. And to give us money, patreon.com/jsbspod. Thanks for working through the hangover. And
That was good for me.
Yeah, hopefully it was therapeutic. And we will see you guys all soon. We will be back hopefully on a bit more of a regular schedule, but we will keep you up to date on the social channels. If you want a unique look at anything specific, feel free to send an email to jsbspod@gmail.com, and we can have Radovan break it down and get his take on the world itself. So that's roughly an hour and 40 minutes of your life you're never gonna get back.
Oh, this is the goodbye bit.
A man in a trench coat in the dark. A woman's lost a kid sleeping in the park. Rag suits, daggers, Park Avenue. Everybody wants to talk to you about just some BS of there. Just some BS. Just some BS of yours. Just some BS. Just some BS, yeah. Just some BS, yeah. Just some BS of ours.